Welcome to another episode of the Not Another Yoga Class podcast and LinkedIn Live series. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Jo Robinson Howarth, who is the director of the Happiness Club. And we're going to be talking about a subject that is quite close to my heart. But before that, Jo, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Pleasure to be here. I'm Jo Robinson Howarth. I am the founder and director of the Happiness Club. I'm an advanced hypnotherapist. I'm a mindfulness practitioner. I'm a couple of other things thrown in for good measure. I'm a mum of two teenagers, menopausal, all the good things. And I started the Happiness Club, roughly 100 years ago, because I come from stress and anxiety, and I wanted to help other people experiencing those kind of things, especially in the workplace.
Amazing. Stress and anxiety is a big subject because it's something that I guess all of us experience at some point. Some of us experience, I would say, anxiety a lot more than others, to the point where it can become crippling. What's really interesting about the conversation we're going to have today is we're going to be talking about those people, which was yourself, who are experiencing stress and anxiety symptoms almost without anyone realizing. And what organizations can do to help those people is the direction that I'd like this conversation to go in. So please kind of tell us a little bit about your background when you were employed, and then we'll go into what you were experiencing then.
Okay. So when I was employed, gainfully employed, I was a corporate event manager. So I used to organize award dinners, conferences, exhibitions, that kind of thing. Event management is one of those industries that looks really glamorous because you get to travel around and you get to meet celebrities and wear ball gowns to dinners and things like that. It looks really glamorous, but actually it's an incredibly stressful industry to work in. Because, in my opinion, one of the most stressful industries to work in, because there's an absolute deadline. The event's on the 10th of June. You can't move it. You can't give yourself an extra couple of weeks. You can't get out of it. It's happening then. So, in the run up to an event, 18, 19, 20-hour days are an absolute matter of course. If it's a 2 or 3 day event, you don't sleep. It literally is the most stressful thing. And obviously, I was an agency event manager, so I had clients who obviously wanted everything to be bob on and completely perfect. So you've got that pressure, external pressure, and the pressure of the deadline all colliding at the same time. So when I was an event manager,
I had a little stint in events when I was around, I would say 18 to 21. I worked as a bar manager for a catering company that did events. And so I know what that feeling is like, because when I saw the event managers, by the time they got to the event, they looked exhausted.
Yeah, exactly that. And it just is, it's a world of perfectionism, which I now know. I was a perfectionist. I now know that whole perfectionist thing is a symptom of anxiety. I didn't really know that when I was doing the actual job. But yeah, I experienced high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety. Now, one of the important things to say here, I think, is that actually I had always experienced anxiety. I didn't really realize that at the time, but it wasn't something that my work created in me. And the stress was created by the pressures of the work, but I'd always been prone to experiencing overwhelm and stress before I was gainfully employed, right? So it isn't that necessarily that these things are caused by the workplace. They can absolutely be exacerbated by the workplace. They can be caused by the workplace. But for me personally, I was already experiencing those things in my private life. I was already having therapy for them. And then I got this job that just made the whole thing 1,000 times worse.
I think this is a really, really important point. A lot of the time when we have these conversations, we lead with fixing the culture is the way to solve them. Fixing the culture is the way to eliminate stress and anxiety. And I totally think that it builds a foundation in which it stops any pre-existing issues becoming exacerbated. But generally speaking, I think this conversation needs to be had as well, which is, do you know what? People are struggling before this job and during this job, and it can be unrelated to the job. or the
Exactly.
workplace.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think when I first started out, which was quite a long time ago, doing this kind of work, I used to get sort of, I would speak to managing directors of companies or whatever, and they would say to their attitude really, and this is 10, 15 years ago, their attitude to me was, what's it got to do with me? Like, why is it my business? If my employees already have depression or already experience high levels of anxiety, why is that my problem? Right. And that is part of the messaging that I've been working on over the last however many years, because it might not be that it starts in the workplace, but it sure as hell will affect that person's productivity, that person's ability to do their job, and at the same time, depending on the workload and the culture in that company, it can make it worse for them. So there's lots of different factors, I think, that can all combine, and that's absolutely what happened for me. And my event management career culminated at my first agency with me literally having an absolute meltdown on site at an event at my boss, because he was trying not to swear now, he was not a great person. And he just pushed me that bit too far, and I literally had a meltdown in front of my whole team, in front of my clients, in front of my suppliers, in front of the celebrities. It was not a pretty sight. It really wasn't. And I use that example as a teachable moment, if you like, in the work that we do at the Happiness Club now, because I've been there and I've had that meltdown. And, up until that point when I had the meltdown, nobody that I worked with had any idea how I was feeling. I came across as calm, confident, sure of myself, in control, knowing what I was doing, organized, efficient. That's how I came across. But inside, I was the complete opposite of all of that.
Yeah, do you know what? This is something that that's striking a chord with me. I struggled with depression on and off, little periods of depression over 10 years. And I had no idea that's what it was.
Right.
The fact that I had no idea kind of demonstrates that no one around me had any idea. In fact, everyone thought I was probably the loudest, kind of most enthusiastic, sort of happy person that they were around, and it was all just a compensatory mechanism to sort of hide this chaos that I was kind of trying to deal with. And so, yeah, I really want to kind of explore this a little bit. So what is it that you think the organization you're working for could have done better to identify the fact that you were really, really stressed and very, very anxious?
Oh, they could have started just by caring, because they just really didn't. I mean, this is a long time ago now, but I know there are still companies that operate in this kind of way out there. That's why you and I are needed, and why we do the work that we do, right? They literally didn't give a monkey's what was happening in your private life, how you were feeling. But there were no check-ins, there was no. And if you got to the point where you needed to talk to your line manager or the next person above them, because my line manager was the managing director of the company and I did not get on with him, so I used to go and speak to the actual board of directors. But it was very much, don't want to go down another rabbit hole, but it was very much, she's a woman. Is it your time of the month, love? That was the kind of attitude that I got, she's a bit hysterical, women are a bit emotional. So anytime that I tried to escalate how I was, what was happening in the workplace in terms of workload and, I was literally made a manager with no training whatsoever. I was literally, one day I was in the team and the next day I was managing the team. Literally the next day, like, hello, I'm your boss now. Not entirely sure what I'm doing. And there was no support whatsoever. So, and I think that's a key word, actually. I think support is a key word, right? Show your people that you care. Show your people that they're supported in some way. The number of companies, and I'm sure you get this too, the number of companies that I speak to where they will say to me, oh, yes, we've got an EAP in place. We've got this in place. We've got this in place. People can access this, that, and the other, all this good stuff. And then you speak to the
all
people
the
that
apps.
actually, there, right? You speak to the people that actually work there, and they have no idea that any of that's accessible to them, or how to access it if they wanted to, or they have to go through HR to be able to access it, and they don't want to go through HR because they don't want to fess up to anything. Thanks very much, which was me. I wouldn't have wanted to tell my boss in a blue fit what I was experiencing. And that would have been the only way that I could have accessed help through work, would be to tell somebody at my workplace what I was. So, I mean, I was having private therapy that I was paying for myself because I didn't want anyone at work to know, because I didn't want it to affect my career prospects, my promotion prospects, my pay rise prospects, the attitudes of the people. You know, like I say, anytime I did go to the directors, it was very much, you're a girl, whoops, right? So I didn't want it to affect all of that. So I just took care of it myself privately, which it shouldn't have to be, right?
It shouldn't have to be. But I think that right now, especially, I think we're in a worse place in terms of mental health support in organizations than we were probably 10 years ago. Because what's happened is a very ineffective service has become normalized. And that's a huge issue, right? So I think when EAP was first created, I think it was almost certainly a very good service. The goal of it was to help support employees. Now, then what happened was, over a couple of decades, this service got diluted and stripped back, and it became the norm, which is very dangerous, because whenever something becomes the norm, it becomes very cheap, and then the companies kind of come together. So now we have maybe 5 EAP providers covering pretty much the whole of the UK, and the service just gets diluted to the point where it's just not effective anymore. Lots of obstacles are subtly put in place to limit the amount of use. Stuff like you were talking about, like the fact that you have to go through HR. There's no provider setting up a live launch like we do at the beginning of a partnership with an organization, saying, this is it, download this, go here, set this up, and then for the rest of your year, if you need support, you just use that. It's completely anonymous, completely separate to the organization. The fact that so many people get turned away when they call this line, so they're at their most vulnerable, and they call and they say, do you know what, we actually don't cater for this specific problem, I'm afraid. The fact that if they do get to speak to someone, they don't get to speak to them forever. They don't get ongoing conversations with the same person, so they have to start afresh with every single person. There's so many subtle ways to make sure this service isn't used. Personally, I think it's deliberate. I think that's just how the system has landed. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
You're speaking my language, dude. I absolutely agree with you 100%, right? EAPs, and I'm sweeping generalization, but hey, let's go for it. EAPs are not well-being companies. They are insurance companies, right? It's like the same as the AA or the RAC for your car. They don't actually want you to use the service, and they charge you accordingly. So you go, oh, look, it's only £10 a month for my AA membership. I actually have no idea how much AA membership is, so I might have quoted that wrong.
Way less.
My AA membership, how brilliant is that? And most people, most of the time, don't ever have to use their AA membership, and the AA price it according to their data and their whatever on how many people use the service, right? So they're raking the money in whilst most people aren't using the service. And in my opinion, EAPs do exactly the same thing. They bank on, we've pitched for work with companies where we've been 3-4 times as expensive as an EAP offering. And it doesn't matter most of the time, doesn't matter. You can sit here till you're blue in the face saying, but what I give you, what we will give you, will knock your EAP out the park. I mean, most EAPs have a 2 or 3% take up, which they bank on. The Happiness Club app has a 49% engagement rate on a daily basis between our members. I mean, it just craps all over an EAP, right? But most companies will go for an EAP because it costs them this much instead of this much. Budget is important, right? I get that in an organization. I run my own company. Budget is important. But when you put budget above the needs of your people, when your people are your biggest asset, And I think that's something a lot of companies don't fully embrace and understand, that their people
I think
are their biggest asset.
there's two ways to look at this, and both lead to getting some form of support that is better than an EAP. The first is, if they're struggling, their performance dips. So let's just
Yeah.
look commercially at it, right? Because commercials
Yeah.
are what senior leaders understand, understandably, because they're under pressure to make sure the commercials are solid. So if their performance dips, that's bad for the bottom line. The other side of this is, if you can optimize the way they feel. So we turn, mental ill health into mental strength, or whatever your terminology is. That's now an opportunity. So we've gone from one end of the scale. So we've brought the needle into the middle, and now we're starting to nudge it up to the other side, where we've got a workforce which is like a productive powerhouse, because they have the type of support that every single day, or almost every single day, they can turn up as their best selves.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's not just, I mean, again, when I first started talking to people, it was all like, oh, it's a bit touchy feely for us, right? It's a bit fluffy. But so I started talking to people in business terms, now there's a ton of research out there that proves, you look after your people feel in tip-top condition, physically and mentally, emotionally, they will be more loyal, they will produce better work for you, they'll make fewer mistakes, they'll be off less. There's just like so many business benefits to actually caring for your people, and there's still so many companies that don't adhere to it, that don't see it, that don't
Embrace it. But I like to think positively in this place, and I like to think about all the companies that are doing great stuff, right? When when you speak to, let's say, someone, the people director or HR manager, and you say, look, what is it in terms of support, or what wellbeing initiatives do you have in place? And you can just see them start to roll up their sleeves, because they're about to just drop the best answer you've ever heard, and they know it. And you just read it, and you just listen, and you go, this is amazing. What is unfortunate is those are the companies that tend to work with us, is the companies that are already doing great stuff, that want to do even better. So they're the ones we're talking about, the ones that have gone, okay, well, let's move the needle into the middle now. How far can we push it the other way? How good can we make these people feel? How supported can we make these people feel? And so, having those conversations is just really nice. Like, it makes me feel good when I walk away from it. It's not like, oh, that's an organization already doing good stuff.
Yeah, and I think a lot of HR professionals get it. They absolutely get it. You don't even need to talk to them about the stuff that you and I are talking about. They just understand it. But again, a lot of the time, the purse strings aren't necessarily theirs to control. So that's where, the barriers can come. So it really, I mean, it is a cultural, you understand this totally. It is a cultural thing, right? It has to start from the top. The people right at the top have to understand and embrace. And there are so many companies around now that do those beautiful, forward-thinking, progressive, modern companies that go, yeah, we get it. We understand. If we look after our people, they look after the company, right? They'll look after the customers, they'll look after the company. We will all thrive if we take care of each other. It's really that simple.
Jo, tell me about the Happiness Club.
So the Happiness Club is an online membership, which people can join individually, or companies can sign their employees up to. We operate via an app, which obviously I'm not technical in the slightest, so I have no idea how to work the app. But anyway, I don't have to do it. So that's good. Luckily, I just create the content for it. So we give our members what we call daily strategies. They come out via the app, a bit like a social media feed. And the daily strategy will be, it might be a straightforward mindfulness technique for people to use that day. It might be a story about one of our lives that's given us some kind of insight. We very much share ourselves as people, because we're all people. It might be a meditation audio to listen to. It will be something every day to help that person look after their mental and emotional health. So they come out every day. And then we run a live webinar once a month and a live meditation once a month. And then our members get the option of having 24/7 access to a qualified therapist for ad hoc in the moment support, or they can choose to work with a therapist on an ongoing basis on a monthly basis. So we're very, very much just centered around mental and emotional health. That's our specialism. That's where we sit. And most of our members either experience something like extreme stress, anxiety, depression, those kind of mental health issues. It still absolutely makes my head do a wobble that stress isn't officially recognized as a mental health issue, but there you go. It has a knock-on effect to the others. And we also have a contingent of members who simply understand how brilliant it is to look after yourself on a daily basis on purpose. So there's that mix of in the membership. And again, on an employee basis, for me, it's about being able to reach the people who wouldn't necessarily ask HR for help or tell their boss. The people who were me, basically, who I was, who don't want to have to fess up to anything, who don't want to have to share their inside leg measurement with someone they don't really know in order to get access to the help that they need. They're the people that we're trying to help. And again, similar to what you said about your brilliant offering, ours is a separate app. It sits alongside whatever, separate from the company provision. So people literally get a sign in, they can use it. We can see for the company, like numbers and percentages and things like that. But they can use it anonymously. They can contact us anonymously. Nobody at work ever needs to know they've used it or contacted anyone or anything. That's so unbelievably important for me. Huge, because that's who I was. So
amazing. What an incredible service. I'm so glad that I got to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, good luck. Excited to see what happens with the Happiness Club this year.